Afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas, and I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. Today is part two of a three-part series on the Psychology Hour, a event that we do in partnership with Whole Being Institute. And we're covering strategies to cope with transitions and re-emergence anxiety. Change is scary, and we've had our share of it in the past 18 months. Now we're slowly emerging from COVID-19 restrictions, or are we? And we're grappling with anxiety about what might be, sadness about loss, fear of being stuck in uncertainty. So the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan and Whole Being Institute have brought together two amazing experts in the field of positive psychology. Megan McDonough was the CEO and co-founder of the Whole Being Institute, and Maria Sirois, who is also a master teacher, facilitator, author, and co-founder of the Whole Being Institute, to talk with us today. And today, we're going to be talking about narrative, writing a new story of who we are and who we might be because of all this journey through uncertainty. And it doesn't look like it's ending just yet. I want to let you know a little bit about Maria. She is devoted to the science of well-being and the art of crafting a life that embodies health, passion, and success. And as a positive psychologist and consultant, she focuses on resilience of the human spirit, particularly when under chronic stress, which is perfect because that's what we're all under right now. And as well as during times of significant transitions or feeling the shock of wholesale change. Known for her wisdom, authenticity, and humor, she brings a wealth of perspective from decades of study in the mind-body medicine and resilience disciplines. Welcome to the call, Maria. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just thrilled that you're here.
Hi, Caroline. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be together again. I'm seeing some familiar friends and some new friends. Thank you for having me, Caroline.
Yeah. Should we start, Maria? Should we start with just some mindfulness to kind of ground and center us? Would you like to lead us?
Oh, you'd like me to? Absolutely.
Yes.
So please just settle yourself as comfortably as you can in your seat at this time. Make those minor adjustments that are helpful. I invite you to close your eyes or soften your gaze. And if it feels right, please do bring your hand to your heart. We all need a little tenderness in our hearts these days. What I'd like you to do is just take a few deep breaths in a rhythm that is natural for you. And as your body begins to settle down, I invite you to bring to mind a symbol, an image that is particularly meaningful to you today, something that inspires the positive in you. A symbol or an image, bring that to mind and allow your mind to rest there for just a moment. Taking in one more breath, deep breath. Opening your eyes. Let's interlace our fingers if that feels comfortable and do a little stretch. Oh my goodness. Beautiful. And then I invite you to place in the chat that symbol. So we've got the heart from Bonnie. Hi, Bonnie. Wonderful to be with you. Butterfly, sun, sunset. Gorgeous. Now I'd like you to take a moment I'm going to ask you to take some notes today. So either on your phone or on a piece of paper near you, just 2 or 3 words. What does that symbol inspire in you? Why is wild grass important to Carol? Or Marina important to Jane? Or ladybugs important to another Carol? Hi, the other Carol. Why is the lake important? Or the green Tara, flowers, an angel, the river? Why are they meaningful to you? You see, symbol, image, is often the first step toward metaphor, toward a metaphor that is large enough to hold that which is difficult, stressful, anxiety producing, and that which is life giving. Yesterday, I know Megan spoke to you about the intersection between what's no longer true and not yet true, and that we are in transition between emerging new normals and the loss of the old normals. And in that transition is liminal space. And in that liminal space, that is the most beautiful opportunity to cohere a new story or to reinvigorate a story that is actually life-giving, life-affirming. This is a quote from Robert Penn Warren. After a great blow or crisis, think pandemic, after the first shock, and then after the nerves have stopped screaming and twitching, you settle down into the new condition of things. You adjust yourself and perhaps are certain that the new equilibrium will last. But if anything is certain, it is that no story is ever over. That which we think might be over is really only a chapter. We are in what is called media res in Latin, the middle of a story. And that can be, there's nothing more true to say about our experience of the pandemic. The first, second, third waves have passed. We have settled into some new normals. And yet the tectonic plates continue to shift. Uncertainty and lack of control continue to be present for some of us in very small doses, for others of us in very large doses. And in these transition planes, if you will, is an opportunity to come home to what is useful about narrative. The question to hold for the present day is, what story do I want to be living into today? And I think of today as today, but also say the next 30 days, the next 60 days. What story, in other words, do I want to be living into the present? Who's invited into my story? What elements are crucial? What symbols, images, metaphors will sustain me, right? But there is a larger story question I invite all of us to hold right now, which is perhaps the driving resilience question of this time. This question is the following. Imagine that it is 2 years from now, and you are looking back at this time, at 2021, 2022. What story will you want to be living into 2 years from now? And how can you make that story reality starting from today? You see, stories shift our experience of our living, and they can shift it in positive ways or in ways that actually derail us, demean us, disappoint us. The stories we choose to tell and how we choose to tell them really encapsulate in many ways how we see ourselves, how we see the world, and how we see ourselves in relationship to the world. So the whole being positive psychology question is really this one. How do I shape a story for the present moment that inspires me, lifts me, elevates me, strengthens me, so that I can more likely live into that story that I want to be able to tell 2 years from now, 5 years from now? So there are a few myths I wanted to debunk today about story, and then we'll open it up for questions and conversation. The first myth, and it's really just a partial truth, is that story tells us what happened. Yes, it absolutely does. It tells us what happened. But it also gives us a chance to articulate a better possible future, or to articulate who we might be if we were a little bit more of who we might want to be. It has a way of bringing us, in other words, into the realm of the imagination, or as Martin Seligman would say, prospection, right? Designing the future, right? And because story can do both these things, tell us what happened, and bring us through our imagination into a possible new, better future. It is both grounding, reality checking, and opening, expanding, expansive. The other day, like many of you, I know Caroline, as we were getting ready today, articulated that many who were on the call yesterday talked about this unsettledness, this anxiety, this sort of chronic uncertainty. I am no different than you. This is what I wrote on July 27th, so just last week. I've been sad for months now. Any touch of beauty brings tears. I feel as limp as an exhausted kitten. Everywhere I look is a tender fragility. 4 days ago, a 7-pound Yorkie Terrier, Macy, protected his 10-year-old owner, Lily Kwan, from a coyote attack in Toronto. Even after the predator had grabbed the dog in his mouth and shook the dog violently, even after the ripping of her back and belly, she continued to charge at the coyote and keep herself between the attacker and her owner, Lily. Macy will be fine after days in the ICU, and yet, like the rest of us, not fine as well. The Northeast has been shuttered against rain. The West is ablaze with fire, Europe awash with flood, and hundreds have died in just 2 days, as if the COVID deaths weren't enough to remind us just how fragile and insignificant we are. We, like Macy, are scarred and scared and long for respite, but putting our guard down does not feel like an option. We've moved from languishing to anguishing in hidden whispers, because no one wants to quite admit that we are not, after 16 months of COVID, all better. This is the edge of things, the lip of the canyon, where all below appears sharp, broken, deadly. Now, here's the thing. That is what I wrote on July 27th. And I paused there and I put my book, my story, my essay down, because I know the following. Story does tell us how we're feeling, what we know to be true. It does articulate what has happened. And it is a doorway. It is an opening into possible futures. I could choose to take this into that deadly, broken, sharp abyss at the bottom of the canyon. I could choose to explore what it's like to be on the edge of things, not knowing. I could look up and see, even as one stands on the edge of a canyon, what the sky has to teach me. There are so many possible places to go with story. I'd like you to think of story as a doorway, that in the threshold, you name where you are, what is present and true, and yet you open into new territory. In this way, we start to understand that story is not passive. That is the second myth of story. Often we think, well, who cares? Story, it's just something you receive. It's something you take in, you drink in, you read it, you listen to it, you put it, you hear it on a podcast. And yet, and this is a quote from Lisa Gottlieb, the way we narrate our lives shapes how they become and who we become. The way we narrate our lives shapes how we become and who we become. Just a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, there was a European soccer championship called the UEFA Cup. It happens every 4 years. And Italy was playing against England. Now, England hadn't been in the championship in 50 years. The cup was hosted in England in Wembley Stadium. So this was a huge thing for the British. The British team score in the first 2 minutes. And the Italians basically spend the next, 43 minutes trying to find their shoes. I mean, they're in the game, but they're not really in the game. So at halftime, the British announcer asks the Italian analyst, a lovely man named Alessandro Del Piero, what do Italy need to do to get back in this game and potentially emerge victorious? And Del Piero thought for a second and then said the following: they need to return with courage and tranquility. And that was it for me. That was the mic drop moment. I didn't need to see any more of the game, because he is exactly 1000% what we need to do in this time of transition between the first part of COVID and the second part of COVID is stand centered in both courage, the courage to take some risks, to think things anew, to experiment, to open our hearts and minds, to maybe bring back what had been sustaining for us in the past, and the tranquility of staying grounded in our wisdom, our strengths, our capacity. We are remarkable in our capacity to hold what in medicine is called a dual awareness. You see, in medicine, we are often asked to hold two realities at the same time. I am not well and I am whole. Both are true. In the cancer wards with which I am most familiar with, the dual awareness is often I am dying and I continue to live. Both are true in any one moment. And it is this flexibility of awareness that enables us, that frees us to write a new story. Yes, on July 27th, I felt like I was on the lip of the canyon. I was on the edge. Everything made me cry. And here I am today, August 4th, delighted to be with you. So thrilled to be in connection with Caroline again in the JCC. Happy to be representing Whole Being Institute. Oh, that's all true. And I get to take that story to the place I most want to take it. We are not captive of our stories once we free ourselves to remind ourselves that we are actually the narrator and the creator of our stories with life. So I wanted to give you a prompt to play with for just a minute or two. So take a moment, find a pen, piece of paper, your phone, something to write on. And I'd like you to write just 3 or 4 sentences about, what a imperfect human being you are today. How you're just, not great. How you mess up. How, the doubts, the self-criticism, let those 3 or 4 sentences. Just trust me for a moment. Just give yourself 3 or 4 sentences. We're not going to share these. Like, how are you not the best thing on the planet? Right? Let's just be honest about that. Yeah. 3 or 4 sentences. We're not going to share them. This is just for you. Beautiful. Now I'd like you to pause. I'd like you to take a deep breath in. Maybe a slightly longer exhale, like inhale and slightly longer exhale. Now I'd like you to bring back to mind that symbol or that metaphor, that image that you included at the very beginning. Now, holding that symbol, that image in mind, I'd like you to now write 3 or 4 sentences about how you're pretty much an astonishing human being. How you are pretty much just wonderful. And now, if you wouldn't mind posting in the chat, what changes for you? Maybe just a word or 2 or sentence. What changes for you when you remember how wondrous you are? What shifts do you experience internally in terms of how you see yourself or how you experience this moment, this world? So more open from Bonnie. So physical relaxing, self-worth, there's some emotional, self-relational stuff, a lightness, hope, inner smile, acceptance, encourage, worthwhile, calm. Hi, Amy. I smiled. Natalie, excitement, joyful, proud, and happy. Life is good. There's a t-shirt in that, Amy. Self-forgiveness, right? Capable, some capacity, right? Anxiety rises. Interesting, Dolores. Interesting. So stay with that and see where that takes you. My hope is that as you continue to write into your goodness, that the anxiety over time will begin to calm down. Although, some of us are not experienced. We haven't spent much time remembering how wondrous we are. We spend far more time focusing on the negative. Yes, my beauty. Reframe. Okay. So story is not fixed. It is not passive. It is a doorway into a territory we most want to enter. Herminia Ibarra, who is a researcher on leadership, a global thought leader in the territory of leadership and leadership development, talks about the importance of the personal story, about settling ourselves into a personal story, but a specific kind of personal story, one that activates a sense of growth and resilience and capacity, because we know that growth stories and capacity stories are linked to psychological and physical well-being, whereas stories that are of self-loathing, of rumination, of how we failed, those are linked to depression and anxiety. So if what we want to do is soften anxiety, in some ways even lift it or remove some of it, right, then we really want to be focusing on growth stories and stories that include the best of ourselves. So she prompts us to ask ourselves, when was a time when your strength or your mettle was tested, and how did you emerge from that? What moment, another question she asks, what moment has made you who you are? In the best sense, like made you the fullness of who you are. From the positive psychology world, we can thread in some story prompts that help us stay centered in these defining moments, that help us articulate the good and soften the lens even a bit more sort of sweetly, if you will, by asking, how are you like that metaphor, that symbol, that image? How are you like the sun, like the flower, like the river? How are you like the song in your heart? We might also ask, even though I am not perfect, what do I most appreciate about myself at this time? What do I most appreciate about myself at this time? So we can use inquiry, we can use questions to take us into the story territory that we most want to experience. Do we want to feel happier? Do we want to feel less worried? Do we want to feel more relaxed? Do we want to feel more hopeful? Would we like to feel stronger? In fact, let's put that in the chat. How do you want to feel 30 days from now? September 4th. How would you like to feel 30 days from now? Stronger, confident, centered, hopeful, peaceful. Beautiful. So let's not even worry about the story that we want to be telling 2 years from now in this moment. How do you get to that state? Unafraid, at peace with myself, optimistic, not so lonely and more focused. How do we get there from here, from 30 days out? Well, one invitation is to play with these prompts a little bit every day. So for those of you who kind of like journaling or note-taking, or those of you who like the world of images, of color and pencils and crayons and ripping out magazines, I invite you to do one of two things. Either for the next 30 days, see yourself being a little more safe, a little more optimistic, a little more peaceful, and gather the stories that help you get there. Either the stories that reflect who you are in your wondrousness, or the stories around you that inspire you. So if I want to feel more courageous, I'm going to hold on to that story from the from the UEFA Cup, courage and tranquility. I'm going to hold that story in my heart. If I want to feel calmer, I'm going to remember what it's like to recall a time when a tiny thing happened, and yet I was able to stay calm. I was in my junior year in college. I did a semester away from my college at another university in Philadelphia. And it was the opening night for our internship program. It was a 3-month internship program. So 50 of us from colleges around the country sitting next to each other at dinner. And you might imagine it's kind of like, school, right? Are they going to like me? Am I going to fit in? Is this the right place? Like nervous, right? And within, oh my God, 2 minutes of the head of the program starting to speak, I reach for my water glass, managed to knock it over, and I send water down the table. And I don't know why. I was 19 years old. I don't know why. But for whatever reason, I was able to use what little capacity I have to stay in equanimity. And I looked at the glass. I looked around the table. I just very quietly got up, took my napkin, and started cleaning up the water. I didn't make it bigger than it was. I didn't panic. I didn't run away from it. I just started cleaning the water. That girl, that 19-year-old, is still in me because I've kept her alive by holding on and recalling that story. So if I'm looking for serenity, I want to remember even these micro moments when I managed to be serene. So for the next 30 days, an invitation is to consider where you want to be. And every single day, either recall, write anew, or bring a story from the world toward you, so that over the month, you are remembering and building that capacity. One more myth I want to address, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Excuse me, I know I'm going to sneeze in just 1 second. I'm covering my mouth so you all won't get it through Zoom. The third myth about story is that story might feel good in the moment. It might feel inspiring, energizing, uplifting, but it doesn't really matter because it fades, right? You go on about your day. We often forget the stories we've just seen or heard, and that is true. Narrative helps us make sense of a world that's rapidly mutating. But here's what's important to remember. Narrative actually lasts longer than any other data set. Narrative story will be kept in your mind and in your heart and your being far longer than any slides, than any data points, than any pieces of information, even than any visual memory, visual information that you take in. Narrative is the way the human brain has developed to cohere the 11 million pieces of data that are coming at us any one moment. And in a moment of real conscious awakeness, we can absorb about 40 pieces of data, hold on to them. Story helps us cohere all of that into a sort of overarching framework that makes sense so that I can exist in this moment talking to you, and this moment makes sense to me. I make sense to myself. This opportunity makes sense to me. And because the brain everywhere, in every culture, across every dynamic and domain and time zone, the human brain has been so beautifully wired to hold on to story so that we can make sense of our living. It is exactly the thing that lasts the longest. So the stories we tell, the stories we hold on to, matter deeply. Abby, thank you for this gorgeous example in the chat. I'm looking forward to climbing hills in my beloved San Francisco again. I'm currently nurturing myself. I have proven over and over again I am resilient. 5 sentences, 4 sentences, already moving away from the story of what's no longer true about her into the story of what is true and what might yet be true, because she's reminding herself. I'm using the pronoun she, Abby, please forgive me if I'm not correct. She's reminding herself that she has been, and will continue to be resilient. If you think of the moments in your life when you have been most moved to positive action, there probably was a story there, a story that you heard, a story that someone else reminded you about yourself, a story of inspiration. There's been this beautiful commercial during the Olympics of a woman getting a phone call from an adoption agency saying that we have found you a baby in Siberia and she can be yours, but you need to know her life will be extraordinary because she has an illness, a diagnosis, and she will not have her legs. She won't have the use of her legs. And in the commercial, as this little mini story is unraveling, there are images of young girls without legs swimming and becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's all tied to the Paralympics, which is going to be open in just, I think, 2 weeks' time. And as you're watching that, as we are watching that, we suddenly see how that story might open an entire universe for young girls and boys who don't have a limb or 2 limbs, right? How that story is the story of a moment of absolute choice, of action, taking action in a positive direction. So in some ways, and this is the poet David Whyte, we often need story more than we need bread or cookies or even fruit. We often need story more because it does open that beautiful doorway to what is possible, even when the particular moment we are in is excruciating. I think it's time, Caroline, to open it up for any questions or reflections.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk at all about how stories might help us with tolerance. We have people that have decided to be vaccinated, people that haven't decided to be vaccinated, people that have decided to go to work, go back to work, people that haven't, people that have decided to fly, and people that haven't decided to fly. And there seems to be a lot of tension and lack of tolerance. And how can story help us mitigate our unfamiliarity with being with one another?
Right. Well, let me take this to the place of personal responsibility first, because that's where transformation can happen within ourselves, right? Intolerance around other people's choices is often triggered because of a couple of different factors. One is we don't understand, right? I just don't understand. I don't understand your position, your thinking, right? That's one pathway to feeling that edge of tolerance. And the other is when we're frightened. Like I'm afraid that your choice is going to endanger me or endanger those I love. So fear and confusion are often the 2 drivers of intolerance. And what we need to do first is get quiet within ourselves and ask ourselves, what can help me navigate my own inner landscape when I'm frightened or when I'm confused or both? What story helps me stay centered and grounded? So, for example, if I get on a plane and the person next to me isn't masked and the stewardess has asked every one of us to mask, what is it that enables me to be courageous enough to say, excuse me, would you mind putting your mask on? What story can I hold on to that reminds me that I have that capacity, that it's there in me? Or that inspires me to maybe take the risk, even if I'm not sure it's in me. I've never done that before. I'm thinking now of my young adult children who might never have had a moment like that yet. what story can they hold on to like develop that 2% more brave stance where they could say, excuse me, this doesn't feel safe. Would you mind putting your mask on? Right.
Right. And then we go back to what you said before, this time needing courage and tranquility. Right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if the reason I asked that question was just one of our partners that wanted to bring this pandemic reemergence anxiety to the JCC, was asking about that, about tolerance, and wanting to know how do we manage that, especially if someone wants to come back to work and someone isn't feeling like they want to come back to work.
So let's layer in another understanding now, which has to do with boundaries. So we think boundaries are like a contract between me and Caroline. I'm going to make this up, right? Let's imagine I've been vaccinated and I'm making this up. I don't know. But let's imagine I've been vaccinated and Caroline hasn't. And we're both invited next Monday to a meeting at the JCC together. So we're going to be in person. I'm vaccinated. She's not. We're both triggered by each other. We both feel some fear and confusion about the choices that the other person has made, right? Now, sort of Psych 101, so Psych Class 101, when we start talking about healthy boundaries, we think it's between two people. It's not. Boundaries are an agreement in yourself, about your own health and well-being. So if I'm the vaccinated one in this scenario, what boundary can I set to enable me to feel a little safer and a little more compassionate and tolerant of this woman I love who isn't vaccinated yet, right? Where's the boundary? Does it mean that I say, oh my God, I'm so happy to see you. I'm not ready to hug you yet, right? Like, I love you and I'm not ready to hug you yet, right? Healthy boundary for me. Or for Caroline, let's imagine she's entering the meeting and she's made some choices not to be vaccinated. I go to her to hug her. Imagine that she says, it's so good to see you. I'm going to sit over here because I feel a little more comfortable with a little more space, right? So the other way to sort of live in that transition zone of not knowing, but feeling a little frightened and feeling a little confused about the choices others are to be thoughtful about what are the boundaries that sustain you. And that has nothing to do with blaming or shaming anybody else. So this is the tolerance piece. It's not about me judging Caroline or Caroline judging me. It's simply saying, oh, given this set of circumstances, this is what makes me feel safe. I've been to the movies. This is real. Like I've been to the movie theater, like popcorn, peanut M&Ms, the whole thing. My mom is visiting. She's not interested in going inside a movie theater. That's a healthy boundary for her because she doesn't feel like she can figure out what safety is in a closed space. Fair enough. Fair enough. We're not going to the movies. That's her boundary.
Beautiful.
Helpful, Caroline?
Yes, really helpful. And I hope it's helpful for those on the call. I see some people nodding because it's just been like, how do I stand in my heart in this situation, right? I think we've got some comments here. What gets me there is looking at universal understanding. We are all people. Beautiful, Elizabeth. And is there any other questions around that somebody would like to? Feel free to talk about.
While you're thinking about that, the third myth is that story is passive. We receive it, we listen to it. It's actually quite active. As soon as we remember that we are the co-creator of our stories with life.
What kind of story could we tell ourselves when sick and don't know how much time is ahead? Yes, in life we never know that, but this feels very different to me, says Max.
So Max, my younger brother, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Very quickly, he didn't feel well for a couple of weeks and then was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And so he was living in that territory, very sick. We knew the end was coming, but didn't know, was it going to be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months, a year? Like, we knew it wouldn't be more than a year, but and that is that liminal space between what is no longer true and not yet true. And the story that I invited Johnny to think about, my brother to think about at that time, and this is the first conversation I had with him once I got the news, I flew down the very next day to be with him. He was in North Carolina. And I asked John, what is most meaningful to you now? Whether you have 2 weeks or a year left. And he very quickly was able to say that you're all meaningful, my family, my work, my community, but nobody is more meaningful to me than my children. Everything we do for my children now. If you want to be on this journey with me, it's about my kids. And, that kind of focus on where's the meaning for me now, given that I don't feel sick and I don't know much time is left, where's meaning now? That's a gorgeous way of landing into clarity and narrative.
Judy asked a great question, which is, what if you don't have the choice of boundary and or know it will be negative, such as a forced return to the workplace?
So Judy, gosh, you know what, in the best of all worlds, right? We would all have enough privilege and advantage that we could say, yeah, thank you. That doesn't feel safe. I'm not going to do this job anymore. But so for those of us who have options, to take advantage of that option, number one. Number two, for those of us who don't have options and are being forced to return to a workplace that doesn't feel comfortable, I've been encouraging people to exercise every option they can possibly have with the head of human resources to negotiate what feels right and safe. Third, to do that internal work of what are the boundaries, like if I have to return to the workplace and the environment doesn't feel safe to me, and I'm not getting what I need from the director of HR, how can I take care of myself in such a way that I feel like I'm as protected as possible? That's the third path. And then the fourth path is because none of us has all the wisdom in the universe, is to really keep asking the question so that you can learn what best practices other people are bringing to the workplace. I know that people are blogging about it, they're tweeting about it. Here's what I've asked for from my team, from my boss. Here's the decision I made about my work. To just do as much research as possible to learn what best practices might be optional for your environment. At the end of the day, we're talking about wellness and illness. And we're talking about contagion and infecting others. These are not minor themes, right? It's not like you're being asked to return to a workplace where there's no parking and you're going to have to pay parking tickets every day, right? These are major humanity-based themes. And so we want to give ourselves as much thoughtful care in terms of protecting ourselves in order that we might protect others.
Beautiful. Regarding questioning, Roberta asks, if you could give us 5 writing prompts to start this work, what would they be? And is there a good resource for writing prompts like this?
Well, I don't know that I can come up with 5 for you, Roberta, right now on the spot, but I do a writing class through Whole Being Institute. I do 2 writing classes, one writing through fear and the second writing toward happiness. And I do a storytelling class. And they're going to be coming back up again. Gosh, I think in the first or second quarter of 2022. So love to have you in the class if that works. One writing prompt I would give you to start today is that prompt that we started with, which is imagine that it's 2 years from now. What story do I want to be telling then? And write to that story. That's a vision prompt, and write to that for 3 or 4 or 5 days in a row. Yes, and Lois, excellent point. We are also talking about emotional health. We're talking about life, death, well-being, illness, and emotional health.
And how do I get myself to see a positive story versus my usual negative and passivity story?
I'm super concrete, y'all. I mean, I love imagination, symbol, metaphor. I love the abstract, but when it comes down to it, I need to get really practical. I'm looking for a pen. I often draw a T, like a line down the middle of a piece of paper, and I give myself permission to write the shitty story, the story of how bad I'm feeling about myself or how bad I'm feeling about the world or what's gone wrong. And it's a column. And then on the other column, I challenge myself to write the positive story. So I just keep it super simple, make a T graph and write the I'm a terrible person story and I'm pretty much the bomb story, right? Or the world is a terrible place, or this world is wondrous. Just keep practicing both sides of the story. Don't let yourself get caught in only one side.
Yeah. And then Amy says, the situation is that I'm trying to stay safe inside, and my husband is a people person who is enjoying being out there in the world. And what can I do to keep myself safe with his behavior? So interpersonal relationships have different choices too.
That's where that boundary negotiation is so crucial. I've heard this kind of scenario a number of times, especially in the last 4 months when some of the states started to open up and people were more willing to travel and so on. This is where your highest level of kindness, compassion, active listening, positive responding, and clarity about what works for you is going to be pulled to the fore. These are the conversations you don't want to have as a throw off while you're loading the dishwasher. This is a conversation you want to have thoughtfully, take the time, like what feels right. My boyfriend and I are in sometimes very different places. He's willing to get on a plane to a place I'm not willing to go to. There's a chance we could go there in November. We can't sort of pull the trigger and make the trip happen because I'm not sure I ever want to be in that place again. I'm not sure. I felt, so we keep just revisiting and talking and listening with kindness and compassion. How did we get the information for your course? So I'm going to give you my email address. And Caroline, can we put up the whole being link before we close?
Yes, and absolutely. And I think it's a great time to just tell people that one of the things that I did, it was a beautiful invitation from Maria and Megan to join and take part in it's a 9-month course that the Whole Being Institute offers, and it's the Certificate in Positive Psychology. And I know many of you on the call are SIP alums. It stands for SIP. I cannot tell you the benefit for me leading my organization in the way that I did with being around in an environment. And I wondered if you could talk about the environment, Maria, being in an environment in which people were asking these questions and honestly looking at both, the reality, the T, right? The reality of what is and what can be, right? The negative and the positive. And in a multifactorial way, right? It's not so black and white. And being in the SIP program and being encouraged to have these, what I would call micro practices. I've been reading Tal Ben-Shahar's new book about Spire, and we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. And he was saying that he would rather have, if someone said you could run for 5 minutes every day or run once a marathon, which would you do? And he talked about the importance, and Maria, I'd love to know your feeling about this, the importance of small little things that we do on a consistent basis to elevate our spirit. But I'm going to put a link in the chat about the SIP program, and you do get a discount if you decide to do that. And also the Whole Being Institute does donate back to the JCC, which is a virtuous giving circle. And that's something to consider. Especially because I thought we would be done with this. I was talking to a neurologist today who said, we had just closed all the COVID wards and now we're reopening them again. And it's really another liminal space that we're in. So I encourage people to think about that as a way just to create some environment of positivity. Like you're in there and you can't help but, right? You're surrounded by people that are thinking this way. And that's been really helpful for me.
So a few things. You have my email in the chat, and you can just email me directly and I'll add you to my newsletter, and you'll know about upcoming courses. Through Whole Being, I'm revising my resilience course that I offer in the fall because there's been new information emerging over the last few years. So there's a new resilience course coming in the fall called Mastering Resilience. In the spring, I do a course for presenters, in the winter rather, and then I'll be offering those writing and storytelling courses. Those are short. Those are 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. The certificate program, that 9-month program, is radically life-changing. And right now, Amy, yes, all those courses are on Zoom. And yay, right? Bummer. And yay, we can do this. The certificate course, I think, in addition to providing a wealth of research and knowledge, very practicable tools that help you shape your experience of work or living or loving or health every single day, helps you participate in a community of like-minded, like-hearted individuals who really are seeking wholeness and health and well-being and happiness, not just for themselves, but on behalf of showing up with more energy, vitality, generosity, and positivity in the world. We are a global community of positive psychology practitioners who really are devoted to well-being. Now, here's what's interesting. So positive psychology emerged as a specialty 3 decades ago, a little over 3 decades ago. And the first wave of positive psychology was really directing psychology to focus concentrated research on what does it mean to thrive, to be strong, to be healthy, to be resilient, to be happy. In other words, let's focus the good, the science of the good, right? In addition to the science of pathology, which we had already spent over 100 years exploring. Let's explore the science of the good. That was the first wave. The second wave of positive psychology, which is up until very recently the dominant wave, is how do we consider thriving in the presence of suffering? Fair enough, right? The third wave, which was just announced at the International PosPsych Conference a couple of weeks ago, is really the understanding and appreciating that there is no individual health and well-being, that there is only one health, that my health and well-being has dramatic impact on those I care for, those I love, those I seek to influence, those I meet and greet, just as it has impact on the planet, my choices about the planet. The well-being of the planet has an impact on the choices that how I experience, how we experience our lives. So this interconnectedness is absolutely crucial moving forward. Note that there is room in positive psychology for the worst experiences, like a pandemic, like a diagnosis, like a loss. That wholeness and whole being doesn't rest on only feeling good, seeing the good, honoring the good. It rests there in combination with the other realities, which is that life is difficult and capricious, that many of us are struggling internally, relationally, spiritually, physically. I mean, I'm on the edge of the canyon. That's where I was July 27th. That wasn't that long ago. God knows I'm going to be there again probably pretty soon, because that's what my experience is right now. And I can celebrate being with you all in a moment like this.
Maria, I'm also struck by once you said to me that before you started positive psychology, you weren't the most positive person.
It was interesting because I was always a very hopeful person, but I was also tortured. I was anxious, ruminative, pessimistic, filled with really self-degrading, terrible thoughts. I woke up in the morning and just hated my life, hated myself. And I thought that was normal. I thought that's how young adults woke up, So I've been on this journey for many, many years. And like the story with Tal Ben-Shahar, chose not to run one marathon, chose instead, and this is how we know actual transformation is sustained, chose instead to learn to shape a little bit every day how I think, how I feel, and how I show up. Who I show up with, what boundaries I set, and the stories that I tell myself.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, everyone, I put in the chat, if you're interested in knowing more. I also put, if you haven't already, or if you want to send it to somebody, our link to the Positive Psychology Hour. I know some of you are new. You have joined us for the first time, and we welcome you. And some of you have been with us since the very beginning. We are going to continue this series. Number one, I need it. I don't know if anybody else does. And it's positive psychology isn't something that you learn and then you let go of, right? It's a practice. It's something that you do. And please know that the JCC, I always say it stands for Join a Caring Community. It's the partnership with Whole Being has just been a perfect partnership in terms of philosophy and in terms of intent. And I just thank Megan and Maria for being here, for being willing to give of their time. They are giving of their time for free this week. All of the positive psychology experts that come give of their time. And that's part of positive psychology too, isn't it? Giving back, making the world better. I think that's amazing. So thank you for joining us. Any final words, Maria, that you have?
Just know that we are in that liminal space, that transition zone together, and the choices that we make today will lead to a possible better moment tomorrow. And over time, those days add up to our future. So no need to plan out the next. Let's just stay focused on the present moment and the stories that we're shaping for ourselves today.
Beautiful. I'm also going to put a few other JCC programs about beating burnout, reducing fear and anxiety with hypnosis. Tomorrow night, if you want to join me after we work with Megan, Chef AJ is going to be cooking up an amazing feast and talking to us about how food can ground us and center us as well. So I thank you. I'm going to take off the spotlights and let you guys unmute if you would like to say thank you to Maria. I am just filled with inspiration and a few micro practices to do. So thank you,
Caroline,
Maria.
what is Thursday's menu?
What's on the menu? I don't know. We're going to find out tomorrow night. Yeah.
No, Thursday.
Thank you, Maria.
Thursday.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yes,
Thank you so
goodbye,
much.
everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
Maria.
Thank you so much.
Love and
Yeah.
peace.
See you
Take care,
tomorrow.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so
See
much.
you tomorrow.
Programs have really been helpful.
Thank you.